Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Cam Ward. Today we're going to be talking about the Blackmagic 6K full frame cinema camera. Now, I received this camera about a month ago. I've been testing it, tried this in so many different scenarios now. I'm going to keep this as short as possible. This is kind of like a first impressions video, but I have run it through a lot of tests. So, I mean, I've tested low light, I've put it on the gimbal, the RSC2. I've shot handheld with it. I've shot 120 frames per second in HD. We shot 6K, obviously 25 frames, 36 frames in the 60 frames per second modes at 6K, as well as 4K. And I've also shot some time lapse on this camera as well. But yeah, I wanted to show as much footage as possible because I've shot loads of test footage. If you enjoy this video, be sure to hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. A little bit of a disclaimer, Blackmagic did send me this camera. They don't expect a review or anything like that. So drop me a comment if there's anything you would like to see in future versions of this camera. I don't know if they're watching, but maybe they'll have a look and see some of those comments. We'll see. So as you can see here, I've got this thing with the Viltrox adapter on the front for EF lenses. It's also got the battery grip on the bottom of it as well. Totally usable without the battery grip, which is great. So my first thoughts on the reveal, like when they showed this camera off, I was like, damn, they've actually done it full frame, awesome, that's great. The footage looked incredible. I was very excited to get my hands on it. Can't say I was disappointed because I really like the form factor of these cameras. Everything's built in. The screen on the back is awesome. Very impressed with that, and it always impresses clients when they see it and you've got a lot on there and they're just like, oh, that looks great. So I really like the form factor of the Blackmagic cameras. One of the kickers for me, and this was kind of like one of the big ones, I was like, oh, that's a shame. Frame rate options, 6K, 60 frames per second, awesome. Like everything's kind of in there, but it just felt like it was lacking in terms of 2.7K, 120 frames per second would have been really nice. I mean, obviously 4K uncropped, 120 would have been awesome. I was like, oh, I'm probably gonna have to keep the Pocket 4K in the backpack now. So I was like, oh, I'm hoping this would be the camera, the only camera I would need in the bag alongside the Ursa 12K. So yeah, I think this camera sits a little bit in a weird position in the whole lineup at this point. L-mount, I'm glad they switched from EF, but it's not the perfect mount in my opinion. So we'll get into a bit more of that later on. So let's get into the pros about this camera. Obviously, if you've been watching reviews out there like I have, you've been watching everybody else's impressions and stuff like that, the first thing everyone is saying, and me included now, is the image out of this camera is beautiful, absolutely stunning. Like my first shot, I audibly said, wow. Like I was looking at the back of mine, I was like, whoa, this is so much better. Don't know what they've done, but it just feels that extra, I don't know, 10% better, let's say. I know we're talking little things here, because the 6K Pro and the Pocket 4K still look great, but it's just got that something about it. It just pops, and it looks so much better than those other cameras, in my opinion. That could also be that I've just missed the look of like true full frame, because I've been working on Super 35 so often now, between all the Blackmagic cameras, Arri, Red, and whatnot as well. So yeah, maybe that was it as well. But yeah, I love the full frame look, and it's awesome having it on this camera. It doesn't feel compromised or held back when you've got full frame. You can really get the most out of your lenses. So price point, again, as always, Blackmagic deliver. Like the price of this camera is insane. Now, you know what? The new memory cards, I get confused about the memory cards. I'm like, CF, is it CF Express? Like even still sometimes I'm like, so now it's CF Express cards inside the 6K full frame. Cost me like £130. So the great thing is I can just run this thing for so long now. I don't need to have a cage on the camera, and I don't have to have an SSD with a wire trailing somewhere on it to run this camera properly and shoot at the resolutions I want to shoot at. So that's awesome. Love that. It keeps the form factor compact, all built in with the screen and whatnot. As mentioned, battery life, fairly okay. Not terrible, not amazing, but for me, perfectly fine. I could happily run it with a couple of batteries on me. And for the battery grip, I'd maybe keep it on there if I'm doing a client shoot, because then I don't really have to think about batteries at all. So yeah, very good. Battery is okay. Could be improved, could be better, but it is shooting full frame 6K RAW internally, so I'm cool with it. It's fine, it's totally fine by me. L mount. This is great because now we're not locked into EF lenses anymore. We've got so many other options to adapt lenses to this camera, including things like the Sirui lenses and stuff like that. I've been really eager to get a hold of them and give them a go, but I just wasn't able to on the old cameras. But it just opens up that flexibility, and it's so much easier now to adapt if you're doing a multicam shoot, any of those lenses. And buying PL lenses, for example, will just work now and are a better investment for this ecosystem of Blackmagic cameras, because I assume their other cameras in the future moving forwards will now be L mount. So yeah, it's probably a good time to be investing in L lenses. It's not the mount I would have wanted. As I mentioned so many times, RF would have been awesome. And I say that because I think it would open the camera up into a different ecosystem of people in terms of running gun videographers who could pair this with something like the new Canon 24-105 with image stabilization built in, because that lens looks awesome. I'm like, that would have been my dream lens, 5 or 6 years ago when I was doing more running gun jobs. It is what it is, and I don't know too much about the L mount, so I'm happy to kind of admit that I'm still learning about what lenses I can use and adapt on the L mount system. So it might be those lenses exist, but Panasonic lenses, something about them don't really excite me or get me interested, so probably not something I'll be jumping into. But yeah, interesting either way, and I'm very glad they have done the switch anyway, away from EF mount. So just a few very quick points is there's no need for black shading on these cameras. If you come from red, you've got to wait for that black shade and stuff like that. And it can just be a bit of a faff. I know it only takes 5 minutes, but sometimes you can be ready to go for a shot. You boot the camera up and you've got to wait for a black shade. Now on the 6K Pro, I did notice a hot pixel the other day. I was like, oh, what's that doing there? I just popped into the settings and did a little recalibration. All good. Everything was good to go in like literally 2 minutes. And I guess on that point, the menu system is one of my favorite systems to work with Blackmagic because it's so easy and intuitive to find everything and kind of dig into the menus. The proxy workflow, the built-in proxy, so when you record a clip now, it makes a proxy for that clip automatically on the card. Very nice feature to have, not something that I personally use very often because I edit on an M1 Max, totally fine on that system. I know it's an older computer now, the M1, but yeah, 6K full frame B-RAW plays perfectly fine on that system, which is awesome, like absolutely insane. So when you're kind of on an agency shoot, sometimes they are often transcoding to proxies after the fact. So definitely speeds things up, which is awesome. I actually really like the aspect ratio we're getting as well, the little square. So it's just something different. There's something about it where I know it might sound ridiculous, but I was trying to explain this to someone. I was like, I don't know, maybe it's just a new perspective, like a different way to look at the image in camera now. But it just feels a bit different and I quite like it. It's quite exciting. I'm like, oh, this is cool. It's a different way to frame. So yeah, it's really cool. I really enjoy it. So just a quick note on this. If the light's changing, I feel it getting darker over there, but I don't have any space really to set up a light in here. So it is what it is. I'll bring it up in post, and apologies if the light's changing between cuts, but it's just the way it goes sometimes when you're living in London, eh? So let's get into some cons, some things I don't like about the 6K full frame. So the first thing for me is, as I mentioned, is the frame rate options. Tiny little bit limiting, means to me that I've got to keep a second camera in the bag. For me, it'll be the Pocket 4K with the speed booster, as well as the Lauer 9mm. So I can use the EF lenses and I can pop that Lauer 9mm on for full frame kind of slow motion if I need 120 frames. See, I'd really love to see a 2.7K 120 frames option at a minimum inside the 6K full frame Mark II or whatever you want to call it. I mean, by the time that camera rolls around, I'd probably expect 4K 120 frames uncropped really. So that would be nice to see as well. Now, low light. These cameras have never been good low light cameras in my opinion. But 3200 ISO has always been very usable for me at the Pocket 4K. And I'm not sure what's happened. I don't know if it's something that I've done or if it was something in the camera that needed to calibrate. I'm not sure because something about the 3200 ISO, even though it's rated to be a native ISO, it was just very messy for me and barely usable in a lot of circumstances. So I didn't really want to use it at all, to be honest. I mean, obviously as a cinema camera, you should have lighting for these cameras, but you are in a pinch sometimes, like just when you need to crank it, and even denoising it just didn't really help the issue. So I'm not sure, that could have been a camera issue. I've updated the firmware and stuff. I do need some further testing on kind of that side of things. So definitely do your own research on that one. And don't buy this camera for low light because it's just not that kind of camera. So let's talk about the gyro stabilization. I've seen the thing now about fixing rolling shutter. I've never really had too much of an issue with rolling shutter. I think it's one of those kind of blown out problems that people kind of complain about, to be honest. I don't think anyone really notices it. I tried to use some of the gyro stabilization because I was quite excited to actually give it a go because I've never really used it. And I've got to say, again, this is a first impression. I ran the camera, I think I calibrated it and just never really got any good results out of it. All the footage I've tried to stabilize from this camera in DaVinci has just generally given me issues. It looks like a bit wobbly. You probably noticed it maybe in some of the footage. But having said that, in the past, all of the 6K Pro footage, the 4K footage, any of the B-roll footage, even from the Ursa, stabilizes beautifully inside DaVinci and Premiere. So it was a bit baffling. I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe it needs some updates on either side. Maybe by the time you watch this video, it's fixed. I don't know. So again, first impressions, but that's something which I've run into as a problem. So this is a very niche one. As I mentioned, I did shoot a little bit of time lapse, and I kind of went out on a whim with Ollie, and we used to shoot a lot of time lapse together. We shot in a lot of different places, and we'd shoot on the Canon 5D Mark III or the A7S Mark II. We love doing long shutter speeds, you know, so you get those nice, beautiful trails. This camera only goes down to 1/5 of a second. So I don't really want to call this a con because it's not that kind of camera, but it is kind of like one of those things I would like to have. It'd be nice to see if we could get more out of this camera's sensor. I mean, the image is so beautiful out of this camera that I was like, oh, it'd be really nice to shoot some kind of long exposure time lapse and see how that looks, but that's not really possible. I don't know if it's possible, but it would be cool to see those time lapse features just enhanced a little bit more. It'd be nice to have. So let's talk about the internal, the lack of them. I'm not too fussed about this, to be honest. I'm totally okay with variable NDs. I do love the convenience of the 6K Pro. I was really happy with having those ND filters in there, as I've mentioned in my review. But after that review, sometimes I would have, in fact, I was on a job, and I mean, this is my bad, but this is a real world situation where this stuff happens. I was shooting around a lot of seawater. It was like yachts and boats and stuff. It was pretty intense. And you know, splashes happen, stuff like that. The internal NDs stopped working and I was stuck at a certain ND. Now, props to the camera, like at some point it kept working, no problem, like except from the NDs being a bit iffy, it was fine. About 2 or 3 weeks after that, the camera completely works as normal again. So you've got to also bear in mind that this is another point of failure if you're having NDs in the camera. So for me, I do find Blackmagic cameras a little bit temperamental. Sometimes the buttons, the function buttons on the top will stop working for whatever reason. I've already had this issue on the 6K full frame. Sometimes the button just won't respond, and I'm not sure if it's like a me thing or if it's something going on in the camera. Blackmagic perhaps need to do some refinements on the body itself just to make sure everything's working and functioning all the time, because you don't want to be on a shoot where you're like, I can't disable the focus peaking, for example, let's say, because the button's not playing. Now I've got a note here again about, like, as I mentioned in my Ursa review, a better, more expensive camera in terms of just hitting that price point of £3,500 to £4,000 in the UK. I don't think it would be a bad idea, because I think the user base wants it. Like, we want that camera. And if you mention a camera, you know, which has, you know, autofocus, even the same form factor, internal ND filters, better frame rates, and obviously like a bit better low light, you know, that's basically an FX3 at that point. The difference is you can't shoot B-roll on the FX3, and it's just not a Blackmagic camera, which is why we like these cameras. So I don't know. I mean, then are we talking about an Ursa 12K at that point, because that camera is awesome? Like, so it's a tricky scenario. I think what I would have liked to have seen from Blackmagic this time around is actually up that price point on this 6K full frame camera, or the Mark II of whatever this is, the Pro version perhaps. And actually just go to town on putting these features in that people want to see. I know everyone talks about redesign, but it's probably much more realistic and possible if they keep the form factor and focus on upgrading those internals to deliver the things that people actually need and want to use. So for me, this is a camera, the Pocket 6K. It's not a Pocket, I keep saying Pocket. So I'd recommend this camera for people who are looking to make that jump from videographer to cinematographer. If you're making the jump from like events and kind of more run and gun stuff, and you're getting more music video jobs, more kind of commercial stuff where you can kind of spend the time to do the lighting and dial in those shots, this is the camera for you. The full frame's awesome, the look is amazing, you can run it as is without any extra stuff hanging off it. So this is not a camera for someone who's looking for an all-rounder camera, an all-rounder tool. If you're the kind of person that arrives in a job and they're like, well, you're gonna have to go shoot in the basement and you're gonna have to crank it to 6400 ISO. I've been there, it happens. This is not the camera for you. If your client says need some photos as well, not the camera for you. This is a video-focused camera primarily. Now I've got a project coming up and I was like, it's a kind of commercial project, not massive budget, but still kind of like somewhere in between. And I'm like, I kind of want to use the 6K full frame for the main camera, for the A cam, because there's a lot of interior spaces we're shooting. And I'm like, oh, I kind of want to use that. But the Ursa 12K is obviously the camera for the job. And I'm like, I don't know. So gonna see how that one goes. We're probably gonna keep this 6K full frame on the gimbal and use it for kind of that kind of stuff. But yeah, very interesting because that full frame look, it looks amazing and it's the new thing and I want to use it more and more. So we'll see how that one goes, and I'll probably do an update video if I feel like we need one in a few months or so. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this video, I hope you gained something from this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to hit like and subscribe. If you've got any questions, drop me a comment. You can follow me on Instagram at @CamAwardFilm. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Now I'm going to try and grade this footage and bring it up as much as possible since we've lost all the light. But yeah, thanks for watching.